Welcome everybody. Thank you for being here for the hearing. We are Friday, 9:30 a.m. Government Reform Room 309. First up, we have 1475. Okay, just checking something here real quickly. State Ethics Commission.
Good morning, aloha, Chair, Vice Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. We will, recognizing you have a very long agenda, we'll stand on our testimony and strong support. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you so much. Next up, we have League of Women Voters of Hawaii. We have written testimony support. Sandy Ma, Executive Director, Common Cause Hawaii.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Common Cause Hawaii supports HB 1475. We have a few suggested amendments. We think that everyone should be required to undergo mandatory ethics training every year instead of every 4 years. We have new ethics laws and ethics standards that change every year. So we should have ethics training every year. And there should be penalties if you do not undergo the mandatory ethics training, such as you are placed on leave without pay if you're an employee, or you're not allowed to sit on committee assignments if you are a legislator. And those are our suggested amendments, and I'm available to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's see, we also have Mike Goliuk Sr. Written in support. Natalie Iwasa, individual as well. Comments requesting an amendment. And then we have late testimony from Dara Carlin, MA, individual. Okay, it was written and it was in support. That's all we have on 1475. Anybody else on Zoom who I may not have called? Seeing none questions, any questions, members? Okay. Next up, we have 2069 again, Robert Harris, ED Ethics Commission.
Thank you again. Aloha, Robert Harris on behalf of the Hawaii State Ethics Commission. We'll stand on our written testimony and are available for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we have DAGs.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, I am Dr. Adam Jansen. I have the honor of serving as State Archivist. I'm here representing Comptroller. DAG stands in support of the testimony, and I want to iterate, as the State Archivist, I have seen the importance of these gifts that are being gifted to the state, the power that they can have, even though the monetary value may not rise to the reporting threshold. The cultural, historical, and political value of these objects are incredibly important as future delegations come to visit the state. We have seen some long-term legislators recently separate from service, and to my knowledge, no protocol gifts were left from their combined 60 years of legislative experience. This is a concern to us. Again, we've been pulled into about 6 of these return visits and have brought items out and have seen the power. So we ask that the committee really help us address this issue to make sure that these items are tracked and that we have them available to you when future delegations come to visit. We can help show that long and storied history between Hawaii and the visitors. So I thank you, and I am available for any questions or comments you may have.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. I believe we have you here as testifier as well. We also have late from Gerard Silva, individual, in opposition. That's all we have on 2069. Anybody on Zoom who I might have missed? Seeing. Okay, seeing none. Questions, members? Oh, Sandy, are you on this bill?
Good morning, Chair. I thought I submitted testimony on this bill. There were so many on this agenda.
Yeah, no, I don't have you on our grid, but go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I did. Apologies. Sandy Ma for Common Cause Hawaii. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We do support HB 2026. However, we have some suggested amendments. We don't think that state employees or representatives of the state should be allowed to keep protocol gifts. We think these are given to the state in an official capacity, and they should be first logged with the state. And if someone wants to keep the gifts in their office after they've been turned over to the state, then they should sign it out from the state for a certain amount of time. And then someone else could also then enjoy the protocol gift after it gets returned. It should not be kept by the person in their office for a collective amount of time for 60 years, then taken back home and lost track of. And so that is our concern, that it should not be kept in their office. It should be first turned over to the state and then could be signed out, because this is a gift to the state and not to the individual. Thank you very much. I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you so much. I believe that's all we have. Did I miss anybody else? No, seeing none. Members' questions. Quick question I have of Dax. He's still on.
Yes, please.
Yes, hi. You heard the Common Cause's testimony, hopefully.
Correct.
And what would be your reaction insofar as it sounds like they're calling for an immediate receptacle policy, so that once the gift is received, immediately it would be turned over to the archives and to the other, and then it would be checked out like we do with pieces of art from the. What's your I guess feedback on that proposed amendment?
I'm comfortable with that. I think that it's important that that protocol gift stay in the office of the giftee, because it shows that relationship. So we don't want to take it away. As long as that individual in that office is part of the state and wants to continue to display it prominently in a place where the public can appreciate it, that's great. But again, the tracking becomes so very important. So whether that is an annual report or a immediate return to the archives and then a checkout process, very similar to how State Foundation runs art and public spaces.
I think that would be it. There would be no keeping even for like a minute. You receive the gift, you log it, and bring it over send it over to the archive building. I think it's what Common Cause is getting at. There's no.
Apologies. We would be comfortable with that, but again, I would default to those of you who actually are engaging in these protocol exchanges, because it is potentially a delicate situation. And so we want to make sure that it's handled well without insulting in any way the gifting party.
Yeah, I understand. Well, that way you can do that. You can accept, and then you're turning it right over to the, although I think further as the bill goes further down the line, I mean, there are some non-traditional gifts, nominal ones that you do that sometimes, like for instance, I heard at the beginning of COVID a couple of years ago, the South Korean embassy was giving out masks, complimentary masks, as a token of goodwill from the people of South Korea to stay safe. I mean, I don't know if the archives would want 52 K95 masks, you know what I'm saying? I mean, so, but I think that I think what Common Cause is suggesting is pretty good. And so hopefully we can support talking about that more as the bill moves on. Okay.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let's move on. 1871, League of Women Voters of Hawaii. Opposition. Opposition. Sandy Ma, ED, Common Cause.
Good morning again, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We stand in opposition to HB 1871. Our code of ethics needs to be strengthened, especially during these times. We cannot allow more gifts, invitations to be to certain events, and free meals to be given freely at this point in time. We stand in opposition to this bill, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We also have late from Laura Safransky, individual. And again, Gerard Silva, individual, opposition. All we have on 1871, anybody else here to testify on Zoom? Seeing none, members' questions? Seeing none, let's move on to the next one on the agenda, which is 2037. First up is Cheryl Park, OIP.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Cheryl Kakaza Park speaking in support of this bill on behalf of Office of Information Practices. In 2019, the House actually passed a resolution asking OIP to conduct an experiment to see if whether by offering quick and formal guidance, we could speed up the appeals process. And it could have worked, except that No time was actually saved because requesters often insisted on getting an opinion even after receiving OIP's written inclination. Rather than leaving it up to the requester or the agency to determine how a case should be resolved, it would have been far more effective if OIP had the statutory discretion to decide whether an opinion or informal written guidance would be sufficient to resolve a case. Current law does not give OIP this ability, and so this bill would amend the law to allow us to provide written guidance in lieu of a legal determination, which we have interpreted to be a formal, an opinion. Our backlog has been growing, unfortunately, and this bill would help us to more quickly resolve some of the appeals that we have in our backlog. It won't result in immediate results because we would first have to adopt administrative rules in conformance with the law, but we do expect that this would eventually help us to be able to handle our growing caseload and improve our efficiency. It would not prevent any member of the public from making a complaint to a OIP, and the requester always still retains the right to go to court for relief without having to come to OIP. The bill would also not require an agency to disclose records based on OIP's written guidance without an actual legal determination, nor would it require the courts to treat written guidance as precedent. All it would really end up doing is letting us resolve appeals that can be resolved more quickly through written guidance rather than through our written opinions. And one amendment we would like to suggest is that we clarify in the bill that we would be providing written guidance, not just plain old guidance. That's the only amendment to the bill that we would like to offer. And we thank you for your consideration of this bill.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Brian Black, the Executive Director for the Civil Beat Law Center and Public Interest. Okay, in opposition, Sandy Ma, Common Cause. There.
Oh, sorry. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We provided comments on HB 2037. We understand what OIP is stating, but we're still not clear why the current statutory provisions do not give OIP the provision, the authority to do what it's asking for in HB 2037. Hawaii Revised Statutes Section 92F-42 subsection 2 and 42 subsection 3 provides for advisory opinions. We're just not sure why this is necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Doug Meller, League of Women Voters of Hawaii. In opposition, and then Lynn Matsuo, individual. She has support and requested some amendments, I believe. That's all we have on 2037. Anybody else on Zoom I might have missed? Seeing none, members' questions. Quick question, I guess. Cheryl Park, you go ahead and give me your, I guess I saw your reaction to the testimony of Common Cause. You want to rebut, I guess, the testimony?
Well, the law requires, the way we have interpreted the law all these years is that we are required in appeals to give written legal determinations, which result in opinions, whether they're formal or informal opinions on our part. So that's why we're saying that we would like the flexibility by amending this particular provision of the law relating to appeals to be able to give written guidance that do not arise to the level of an opinion, because it takes a lot of work on our part to issue opinions. And that's why we have a big backlog. You know, we're waiting. We need to go through our own internal processes and review to issue these opinions. If we could do what the legislature suggested we do earlier and come up with quicker inclinations that can result in more like written guidance, not to the level of written opinions, I think we could resolve a lot more appeals faster than we are able to do so now, because we don't have the ability to control whether we can write opinions versus guidance at the current time under the current statute. And what Sandy might be talking about is, I think maybe she's talking about a different section of the law where we give advice, or well, what we do is when there is no appeal from an actual case or an actual grant or denial of a record request, sometimes we're asked to give advisory opinions. That still results in written opinions on our part, you know, but there's not really an active case. There has not been an actual granting or denial of a record in that case. We call it an advisory request for opinion in that case. So it's different from the appeals that we're talking about, which constitute like 80% of our backlog right now. You know, they're all appeals.
Okay.
I hope that answers.
Sandy, any final thoughts at all from you? We'll move on to the next measure. The explanation of the OIP.
No, thank you. I mean, we just still are confused, but
Okay,
thank you.
good. Appreciate it. No worries. Okay, let's see. That's all we have on this thing. So we're gonna move on to the next one, which I believe is 2026. Again, sorry, my glasses are fogging up. Shell Park OIP.
Thank you again. We offer a lot of different comments on this one. Get my bit. Sorry, I'm going through all the different bills myself, so here it is. And we offered some amendments. You know, the definition of the board business, it would codify what OIP currently defines, how OIP currently defines board business. So we really don't see that that's a problem. The permitted interaction to circulate and comment on testimony. We understand the concerns here, and it would make the full board's discussion of testimony that it's going to submit to the legislature easier to do. So we don't object in principle to it and leave it up to the legislature to decide. The board packet deadline, we have some technical concerns about that. And I know that HTA has also submitted testimony objecting to the 24-hour advance notice requirement because of their need to consider debed reports. So, you know, we're just offering comments to technically address this, but we don't really have any thoughts on whether you need to have a firm deadline such as this. And then the timing of the testimony, this would really change the way some of the boards have run their meetings, because some of them like to have all of the testimony done in the beginning of the session of the meeting all at once. Lets people go home after that if they want to. As long as the boards are going to consider the testimony before they actually consider and discuss the measure, we're fine with that. So I'm not sure if this is really that necessary, but it's up to you. And finally, the land use adjudicatory function, it's up to this committee to balance the different considerations involved.
Okay.
So that's my quick overview.
Appreciate it. We have John DeVries, President and CEO of Hawaii Tourism Authority. Heather Kimball, Council Member, District 1, Hawaii County Council.
Hi, good morning, Chair McKelvey, Vice Chair Wildberger, and members of the esteemed committee. So nice to see you this morning. I'm here, I will stand on my written testimony, but I just wanted to emphasize that the drafting of this piece of legislation was a really collaborative process with Jennifer Brooks from OIP, Sandy Amal was part of it, League of Women Voters, and Civil Law Center was also a part of it. And so I'm just really grateful for everyone's collaboration and work on putting this together. As the previous speaker from OIP mentioned, we're really looking to codify the definition of board business as it has been previously opined by the OIP, just to make sure that the guardrails are very clear in statute as to what is and is not considered board business. Additionally, as a county legislator, being able to, as a full body, comment on and provide testimony to you folks at the state legislature is something that we really want to be able to do in a meaningful way. And we think we've come up with a good compromise where we have to, in a public hearing, agree to a certain set of priorities, and then we're able to come in and meet on that ourselves so that we can match the rapid time frame that you guys are having to deal with over there and get meaningful testimony put together on many of these bills that affect us. We're happy to support the 24-hour board packet provision. It's important that testifiers have the full information that decision makers have in front of them so that they can provide meaningful testimony. And of course, we also support the inclusion of land use board meetings under the Sunshine Law. So hoping for your support today on this piece of legislation. And thank you again, Chair, for hearing it in committee. Thank you.
Okay, we have next up Brian Black, Executive Director, Civil Beat Law Center for Public Interest. Written in support, Sandy Ma, Executive Director, Common Cause.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Sandy Ma for Common Cause. We are testifying in support of HB 2026. We are specifically testifying in support of particular sections, even though we do support the entire measure as a whole. Section 4 is particularly of interest to Common Cause because it allows the board packet to be made publicly available to everyone 24 hours before written or oral testimony is required to be due. And that is because the public wants to be able to provide meaningful testimony. And if we don't get the board packet beforehand, we can't see what the commission or the board is reviewing. And so when we testify just on the agenda items without being able to review the materials, we are not being able to provide cogent information to the board. And also ask for when to provide testimony. The reason to provide testimony after an agenda item is so that we can actually review and monitor and watch the presentations made. That's not to say that the board cannot also allow public testimony to be taken at the beginning of the agenda, but also it would be great to have the opportunity to testify after each agenda item, because many times presentations are made and then it affects how our testimony is given. So I just wanted to provide that information. And I'm available for any questions, but we do support overall the entire bill, HB 2026. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Let's see, we also have a Hawaii Chapter Society Professional Journalist, Sterling Morita, President, opposition, and finally, late individual Gerard Silva in opposition. Anybody else on Zoom who I might have missed who'd like to testify? Seeing none, members, questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next one on the agenda, which is House Bill 2303. First up is Employees Retirement System. Written in support, Carrie Okinaga, Vice President, Legal Affairs of UH Systems. Okay. In support, Craig Harai, Budget and Finance. Written in support, Cheryl Park, Director, OIP.
Yes, hi, thank you again. We have extensively analyzed the Peer News decision that was issued in late 2018 that overturned 30 years of OIP's opinions that had recognized the deliberative process privilege. And the materials that I have online on our website, as well as a bar journal article that was published by the Hawaii Bar, explain why we thought that there were key legislative history materials that were not submitted to or considered by the court when it made its decision, which was a close decision in Peer News. There was a very strong dissent by two of the justices, but unfortunately they weren't able to prevail over the 3-member majority. The interesting thing was both sides are saying we're looking at the plain language of the law and we're looking at the legislative history, but they came out with totally opposite conclusions. And it's which by one vote it carried. So we think that this bill would provide legislative intent. We've been following the Supreme Court's opinion no matter what. But if that is not what the legislature believes was its intent or should be its intent now, then we'll follow whatever the legislature comes up with now. And we think that if you wanted to pass this bill, it would provide a reasonable balance to be able to return to what OIP had been doing for 30 years beforehand. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Brian Black, Civil Beat Law Center. Opposition. Sandy Ma, Common Cause Hawaii.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Sandy Ma for Common Cause Hawaii. We submitted testimony in opposition to HB 2303. The purpose of the Uniform Information Practices Act is for to open government processes to public scrutiny and participation. And we think having another exemption to the public records request will not fulfill the intent and purpose of the public records law. And so for this reason, we oppose HB 2303. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. That I believe is we have an individual, Lynn Matsuo. Ray Kamikawa, individual. Opposition, Adam Jensen, individual. Are you there, sir?
Yes, Chair,
good.
Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you. I want to make it very clear, I am here testifying as an individual, and my testimony in no way, shape, or form reflects that of my employer. What I am is a 25-year archivist and a PhD academic in archival studies. By nature, I am an advocate of public access. And with due respect to those involved, I cannot support the way that this bill is being implemented. The UIPA clearly states that the formation and conduct of public policy, which includes discussions and deliberations, shall be conducted as openly as possible. The way this bill is being implemented, it works in contrary to that stated purpose of the UIPA. And the reason is that agencies should be able to conduct this, and I quote, free of fear from being subject to public ridicule or criticism. You, as its public employees, work on behalf of us, the public. If you're doing something that opens you up to ridicule, I would suggest that maybe you need to reevaluate the process in which you're conducting your business on our behalf. The ability of agencies to decide that their fear of criticism and ridicule outweighs public interest places way too much authority in those agencies. I would suggest that if this bill does move forward, at a minimum, the onus should be on the agencies to obtain a waiver from a third party to assess whether or not their fear outweighs public interest, because the agency is not in a good position to make that call, being so close to having that criticism and fear of having press out there. So in addition to that waiver clause, I would also suggest there needs to be an absolute cap on how long these records can be withheld from the public. The way it's currently written is it says until a decision has been made. Well, what happens in cases where no clear decision has been made? We're seeing at the federal level now, records being told, oh, well, those were just drafts, even though it was widely circulated and understood amongst everybody. The draft conundrum is such a nebulous term that it could open up rife abuse. This policy is always under draft, so it's never going to be released to the public. So I thank you for your consideration and would welcome any questions you may have.
Thanks so much. We also have Douglas Meller, League of Women Voters. Okay, opposition, and Gerard Silva, individual. Opposition. It's all we have on the measure. Anybody else on this bill would like to testify that may not have called? Seeing none. Members, questions at all? No, seeing none. Okay, I'm a little confused. I guess I read the bill as trying to make considered public information, deliberative documents and internal deliberative and pre-decisional materials. Wouldn't that actually be creating more transparency by allowing public disclosure of those documents, which are so important? That's the way I read the bill. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Are you asking somebody to answer? Are you asking me to answer? Well, it would put in a balancing test. So if there is, a high public interest in seeing a bill, a draft, or if it's already been disclosed to the public or widely dispersed, it's no longer considered a draft. There's really nothing holding, nothing confidential about it. There wouldn't be a reason to withhold it from the public, even under this bill. I mean, I think what this bill does is gives at least OIP and the courts the ability to assess if the document should or shouldn't be withheld based on a reasonable balancing test that was suggested by the dissent in the peer news decision.
Okay. Any last thoughts, Sandy, from you on
Thank you, Chair. We're concerned that an agency can have a really large umbrella of what it concerns drafts, internal memorandum, and correspondence. And that could sweep in a lot of documents that will not be disclosed. And so that is our concern. And for a Public Records Act, more information should be disclosed because that is the intent of the Public Records Act. But this sweeps in a lot of records. Lots of things can be called drafts or internal memoranda and correspondence. And it could cover a host of documents.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Let's move on then to 1897 of Hawaii Paroling Authority. We have written in opposition. We have John DeVries, President and CEO. Hawaii Tourism Authority with comments. Mary Alice Evans, Director of the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. Written requesting an amendment. Brian Black again. We have written in support, and Sandy Ma, Common Cause.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We support HB 1897. When I say we, Common Cause Hawaii is testifying in support of HB 1897. We think this is a great bill. We support live streaming and recording of all meetings. This will allow people to be able to monitor, not in real time, could be when they have free time from where they are located. We think that the public should be able to testify after each agenda item, like I've testified on previous measures, and not be limited to testifying at the beginning of an agenda item. Let's see, we also support board packets being made available 48 hours prior to when written testimony is required to be due, so that we could provide written testimony that is meaningful and that could help the board arrive at a good decision. We support HB 1897, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's, let's see, Lynn Matsuao, individual in support. That's all we have on the written list. Is there anybody on Zoom who might? Oh, yes, sorry, OIP.
Yes, sorry. OIP has a lot of concerns about this bill because it can result in many technical problems as well as unintended consequences and increased fiscal and operational feasibility questions for the boards. Additionally, we oppose certain aspects of it. The requirement to live stream and record all meetings actually removes the ability of boards to conduct in-person meetings. Because if you have to live stream all meetings, eventually the boards are going to say, why are we bothering to hold in-person meetings? Why are only the board members having to show up in person at meetings? If you're going to be going through the trouble of live streaming these meetings, then we're not going to hold in-person meetings. We'll just have it all remote. And that might not be the best solution for all boards. And boards that don't have the equipment or technical skills to live stream them are going to be at a real disadvantage trying to comply with that provision. And to keep these records indefinitely, as some other testifiers pointed out, has a real cost to the state. It's not just the cost of keeping them, but over time, you know, the technology changes. So how do you keep these things indefinitely online? So there's all kinds of challenges there. But, you know, there's also like technical problems with the way the bill is written. So it would result in duplicative and somewhat contradictory requirements. Now, when it comes to the timing of the testimony, the bill would take away the public's opportunity to sway the board before discussion, because the way it's written, it's like the public testimony would have to be taken after the board's consideration of each agenda item. OIP has always said that testimony must be given before consideration by the board. Consideration includes discussion, deliberation, you know, and so if you're going to wait till after the board has already considered it, then how are you going to sway the board? And of course, you know, even if you were to correct it to, you know, you might end up having a lot. I mean, board members can always ask testifiers to clarify their comments or ask questions of testifiers. But to require them to always allow members of the public to provide comments after they've already started considering the bill would maybe result in making meetings longer, especially for those boards that receive a large amount of public testimony. It could go on and on forever. And those members who don't have written testimony and are just providing oral comments, their testimony is not going to be considered before the board has already started discussing it. So we have problems with the way that's written. Now, when you identify agenda items as being for action or for discussion, I don't think that really adds much to whether or not a person is going to decide to show up at a meeting. And OIP has never said you have to say what kind of action, if any, you're going to take on a matter on your agenda, so long as the agenda is clearly describing what you're going to be talking about, so people know whether they want to show up or not. So that provision just might create a trap for boards, another trap for boards to fall into and have to cancel their meeting because they didn't say on their agenda item, on their agenda, that they're going to act on a matter. And if they decide to actually act on a matter, and had not stated so on their agenda, it would have to delay action, further delaying government efficiency or ability to timely resolve their important business. We're not clear about what this change on how the agenda is to be posted online is supposed to work. So we really need clarification on that. We talked about the board packet requirement. This one is a little different from the first bill and is a lot more confusing for us. So I think it needs more work. And then when it comes to the accommodation of disabled persons, you have changed the language that was just adopted last year. We had a big discussion about this when the remote meeting provisions were adopted last year. We have consistently opposed being placed in the position of having to enforce Americans with Disability Act or ADA type of laws, because that is not our kuleana. We do not have the authority or the expertise to determine that. What is a reasonable accommodation? We don't know. When should you have to accommodate somebody with a disability? We don't know. We're not in that area of law. If you're going to do that, leave it with DCAB or the Civil Rights Commission or the feds, not with OIP. It has really changed what the law just required to just accommodate requests for electronic packets as soon as practicable into an ADA requirement. And we really strongly oppose that provision.
Can you care to summarize the rest as the testimony?
Well, yeah, and finally, we also recommend that the minutes provisions be omitted from the bill. And we have just an overall concern that we are going to be we're always being put under additional burdens of providing training materials and resolving disputes whenever you have these big changes to the law. And we just went through that this year. It's taken up a lot of OIP's time, and that's why another reason why we can't get to our backlog. All of these changes suggested in this bill will really change the Sunshine Law again really soon after the major changes that just went into effect on January 1st, and will take a lot of time and effort on our part to help implement and resolve disputes that will inevitably arise. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. We also have late from PL Fritz, individual. Comments, Gerard Silva, individual, written in opposition. And I saw him on Zoom, James Gashel, National Federation of Blind of Hawaii.
Yeah, right here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me just say very quickly, we're asking for 3 amendments to this bill. One would be with regard to audio access, which the bill specifies in connection with live streaming. We suggest standard telephone be that means, because this responds to the needs of our kapuna who may often not have computer access, but would have access to listen to the meeting and give oral testimony by means of standard telephone. The other 2 amendments have to do with accessibility. They are not just asking the office to implement the ADA. They're specifying that the notices and the board packets would have to be posted in screen reader accessible formats. ADA doesn't really speak to that question. And so these are very simple amendments. Most of this material would be prepared in that fashion anyway, but sometimes not. So we think those would be very helpful in terms of the accessibility side. And mahalo, hope you can work this language in.
Okay, thank you so much. That's all we have on the testimony list. Anybody in Zoom wishing to testify, do not call. Seeing none, members' questions, 1897. Yes, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate you hearing this bill and making an attempt to make the public better able to participate in meetings being held in public interest. For OIP, please. Ms. Park,
Hi.
thank you so much for your 14 pages of testimony about this bill. Did your staff, Ms. Brooks, share the bill with you that we sent 3 weeks ago?
After she had talked to you, yes. And what she was asked by your staff at that time was not to comment on the bill itself, but simply to say if it was going to have a fiscal impact on OIP. So I did not talk to her about her response before she talked to your staff. Since then, we have been able to look at the bill carefully to analyze what effects it would have on not just OIP, but on the various boards and the Sunshine Law itself.
We realize that that there are so many disparate boards and commissions that it's difficult to accommodate the needs of all of them, which is why we would have loved to have worked with you about changes prior to this hearing. But we appreciate all of the amendments that you offered. But I want to make sure, are you aware that Honolulu City Council is currently holding in-person meetings and live streaming and recording and posting online?
Well, they have the staff to do so, but as you said, there are all kinds of different boards. Some of them have no staff. Board members, for the most part, are volunteers, and many of them have to rely, if they can at all, on the agency's staff to help them out.
Okay, so
they don't
it's
all
possible. It is possible that one person with a cell phone or an iPad and a YouTube or a Facebook account can fulfill the obligation of recording and posting online any meetings. There's no longer an entire army of IT required to fulfill that responsibility.
Part of the reason why when we supported the changes to the law last year, the remote meeting provisions, we thought about the digital divide, because even if it might be easy for most people that I know to do so, there are still people who are out in parts of Hawaii that don't have good broadband access. There are also people who don't have smartphones or the technical ability and skills. They sit on boards. They want to attend hearings. They want to do it in person because they don't know how to do it online.
That's a very Oahu-centric opinion, since people from neighbor islands need to have technology in order to be able to participate.
Well, I'm not sure how it is out in certain parts of like Hana or what. I guess maybe they are really well connected, but you know, there are still going to be people that are unable to do so. So that's why we thought, let's give it a chance. Eventually, hopefully, with the greater access to broadband, and you know, as people get more and more used to this law, it'll happen. That's what we would like to see. So it's convenient for everybody. But there are going to be some people, and that's why we're concerned about everyone. You know, not just the people who have the technology or the skills to participate in remote meetings.
Thank you. We are still interested in getting agenda items and people to be able to comment, as Sandy Ma testified, that allowing testimony only at the beginning is highly problematic when changes are made during discussion. Is there any way that you can see that we could do testimony between discussion and decision-making on agenda items so that when changes are proposed, people can comment?
It's really, I mean, I think it's up to the boards to be able to control and manage their agenda. And, you know, many times if you do have some kind of new draft, at least in the legislature, you have a new hearing. So it could take place at another hearing, but I'm not sure, it's up to you guys. I'm just pointing out some of the concerns because, like you said, there are all kinds of boards that we work with, but there's also members of the public that we work with. So we're just pointing out the pros and the cons, especially with respect to that.
Thank you very much. We
provision.
want to try to bring our boards and commissions out of the dark ages and into the technological modern era.
Okay.
And that's an effort. Thanks,
no.
Chair.
Yeah, no worries. Let's see, you have a question you want or feedback, Dr. Hanson, sorry.
Yes, on behalf of the state archives, we have no dog in this fight. We don't have an opinion one way or the other, but we are the institution that is legislatively mandated to collect the public archives. So from the technological standpoint, we already have the capability to preserve these records and provide broad-based public access. To that extent, we have been downloading all of the recorded hearings of both the House and the Senate that have been put on YouTube, which cannot be trusted to preserve these records. So please don't consider that aspect of the technological difficulty in this consideration.
Oh, no,
we will gladly take that burden on.
I'm glad to hear that forward-thinking attitude from your agency of taking advantages and leveraging cloud computing, especially today. So thank you for that point. Any other questions from any other members of the committee? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the next bill on the agenda, 2235, Cheryl Park, OIP. Okay, we have opposition. Brian Black, Executive Director, Civil Beat Law Center. Written in opposition, Douglas Meller, League of Women Voters of Hawaii. In opposition, Sandy Ma, Common Cause.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Sandy Ma for Common Cause Hawaii. We stand in opposition to HB 2235.
Okay.
We don't understand why another exemption has to be made. There are currently exemptions that county councils may use to attend informal meetings under the Sunshine Law. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's see. That is Hawaii Chapter Society of Professional Journalists, Sterling Morita, President. In opposition. That's all we have on 2235. Anybody else on Zoom would like to testify? Seeing none, members' questions. Seeing none, 2505, DCCA. Written in support, Cheryl Park, Director, OIP. You there?
We oppose this bill.
Okay, thank you. 2505 oppose. Hawaii Tourism Authority. Okay, we have written in support. We have Brian Black again, written, Civil Beat Law Center. Let's see, he's here. In opposition, Sandy Ma, Common Cause.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Sandy Ma for Common Cause Hawaii. We stand in opposition to HB 2505. We understand that there are still people in Hawaii who do not have access to reliable broadband. And so we like the fact that under the current Sunshine Law, there should be in-person and remote meeting requirements. So we don't want to do away with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have Kimiwana Kane, individual in support, and late Gerard Silver, written individual in opposition. That's all we have. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. We have a couple more. Individuals, Dylan Whitesell and Michelle Matson, either here to testify, noting written in support for both. Oh, you're here. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Hi, thank you for giving me the time to speak. Yes, my name is Dylan Whitesell, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself in support for HB 2505. I did also submit written testimony, but I think the important thing is that I believe that there should be more options, not less, for being able to meet. The current Act 220 will still allow in-person and hybrid meetings, but the amendments made in HB 2505 will also allow for virtual meetings if needed. I think part of the language that is in Act 220 that really also impacts Act 220 is that if the physical meeting location loses internet connection or has any issues with connectivity, then if that connection cannot be restored, then the entire meeting has to be canceled. And to me, I don't believe that that is really increasing any sort of access if we have to cancel meetings because a physical location goes down. So I did submit my testimony in support of HB 2505, and I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I believe that is everybody on Zoom for the measure. Members, questions of the testifiers? No. Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to 1874, Mary Alice Evans. Okay, we have Cheryl Park, Director OIP.
For this one, the bill is not going to do what the people intended it to do. So we'll just wait to see if there are any amendments that come out of this bill, and we'll comment on them at that time.
Okay, sounds good. John DeVries, President and CEO, Hawaii Tourism Authority. Support Brian Black, Civil Beat Law Center. With comment, Sandy Ma, Executive Director.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We oppose HB 1874. We understand that retreats can have a team building benefit, but we are concerned that a retreat of this purpose to can cause discussions of board matters that should actually be held in an agendized meeting. And so for this reason, we oppose HB 1874. Thank you for allowing Common Cause to testify, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. We have individual, Fuanani Fioni.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Onauna Thone. I'm the current chair of the Environmental Advisory Council. However, I'm providing this testimony in my individual capacity. I'll go ahead and stand on my written testimony, but did want to just offer some comments after reading, the testimony in opposition to this bill and give you folks a little bit of background. So the Environmental Advisory Council is one of the bodies that, proposed this measure, spoke to the legislators, and they've introduced it. And part of the reason that we did it is, last year through HB 1318, we were moved administratively from the Department of Health to OPSD. With that, there have been some internal changes. There were also changes to what the scope of our authority is in terms of we no longer hear appeals of applicant rejections of EISs and whatnot, and some other changes. And so in that process, the Environmental Council is really kind of looking to, what do we do? What's our statutory function? How do we operate in our new capacity under OPSD? One of, several members expressed the want to hold a retreat. And when we posed that question to the AG, the response was that a retreat of this nature, in which we would not be discussing any business before the council for action, would still need to be sunshine. So that's really where it comes from, right? OIP's testimony has been helpful. The interpretation that I read from OIP's testimony is that we could have a retreat of this nature, but really this came from the response from our AGs was that we could not, and that it would have to be sunshine. So to the extent there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of this bill.
Thank you so much. We also have late from Ben Kudo, Vice Chair, UH Regents.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak on behalf of the Board of Regents. We support this bill. I think the intent behind the bill is a good one, and it really addresses the human nature situation with regard to open meetings. And there is a time and purpose for open meetings, but there is also a time when meetings should be closed so that members of the board or commission can have frank and honest discussions with regard to the operations and the function of the board. We're not talking about making any kind of decisions of matters or issues that come before the university, but these are more internal types of operational and procedural issues that we normally look at, as well as strategic planning for the board. And having been on the Board of Regents for 10 years, I can tell you that, members clam up when the media is there and the public is there with regard to openly discussing their thoughts, beliefs, biases, and whatever. And in a retreat, which is a very special case, what we're trying to do is trying to improve the operation and function of the board or agency itself. And I think it's very helpful as an introspective type of setting to have very honest and frank discussions by and amongst the members of that commission or board. And so that's the intent. We're not trying to get around the transparency issues and that. This is a one-day meeting for purposes of the retreat. No decision making will be had or discussed. So it's for a very limited purpose, and I think it will achieve a significant improvement in the ability of people to be forthcoming to improve current board and commission operations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All we have on 1874 on Zoom, anybody I might have missed? Seeing none, members' questions of the testifiers? Seeing none, 2025, we have OIP again. Comments? Okay. John DeFries, HTA, written in support, and late from Jared Silva, written individual in opposition. All we have on 2025, anybody else I might have missed? Seeing none, members' questions. Seeing none, we'll move on to 2136, Department of Hawaiian Homelands.
Good morning, Chair McKelvey, Vice Chair Wildberger, and members of the committee. We stand in strong support of this measure and stand by for questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Director. I think you're the only one we have on this administrative measure. So anybody else might have come on to testify? Seeing none, members, questions of the Director? Okay, if not, thank you for being here. Next up, 2416, Sandy Ma, Common Cause.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We're providing comments, Sandy Ma for Common Cause Hawaii. We're providing comments on HB 2416, the proposed HD1. We understand from reading this proposed HD1 that this only applies to nonprofits that are C4s. We don't understand why a campaign disclosure bill to inform the public of the sources of dark money contributions are limited to C4 organizations. There are many nonprofits other than C4s, chambers of commerce, unions, etc., are also nonprofits, but this just goes after C4s. Common Cause has a C4. We don't participate in any partisan activities. We don't register as a non-candidate committee. We don't do electioneering communications, but I don't understand why only C4s are being targeted. It is singling out a group when there are many other groups, corporations, LLCs that participate in influencing our elections through dark money donations. They form non-candidate committees, PACs and super PACs that deserve regulations as well. This is a strange bill, and we do not understand it at all. And that's just the tip of what we don't understand about this bill.
Okay, thank you so much. We also have late from Gary Cam, Campaign Spending Commission. And with comments, he does have some amendments.
Thank you. Good morning,
Chair,
Vice Chair, members of the committee. The commission has submitted written comments. Probably the main comment would be that we think the threshold of requiring disclosure of more than $100 is probably too low. And we've also made some recommendations as to the language. And other than that, I'll stand on our comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. We also have one last bit of testimony from Wayne Chung Tanaka, Sierra Club of Hawaii.
Hi, good morning, Chair McKelvey, Vice Chair Wildberger, members of the committee, Wayne Tanaka with Sierra Club of Hawaii. We submitted written testimony in opposition. I mean, we absolutely appreciate and support the intent of reducing undue influence in political campaigning. We do think that there may be some unintended consequences, however. So in addition to the example in our testimony about marriage equality proponents in California being outed and being targeted, I have another example a little closer to home. So in November, when this water crisis began, we were receiving numerous calls from military families that were being impacted. They were, very scared, very confused, and eventually very upset that, they weren't getting the information they needed from the Navy to keep them safe. But as upset and frightened as they were, they're even more scared of potential retaliation if they were to speak out. And so one way that they could, express themselves potentially would be to support the Sierra Club in our efforts to identify good candidates who would, we believe would make good decisions in regards to protecting our water, protecting our environment. So if a measure like this passed, they would be at risk of potentially being exposed simply by giving a $100 donation. So, just another example of a potential unintended consequence of what I believe is a well-meaning measure. Happy to answer any questions and thank you.
Thank you, sir, for being here. Appreciate your testimony. That is all I have on 2416. Anybody in Zoom wishing to testify? Seeing none, members' questions? Seeing none, I believe this is the last bill on the agenda. So we will go ahead and we will recess for decision-making. Recess. Everybody, welcome back. Given the testimony today, and that's why we have this process, and it's awesome. And I like it. There are probably some things we're going to need to revisit with the bills on the agenda. So for everybody, for the agenda today, we're going to move them. Decision making will be time certain. Next Wednesday, 9:30 a.m. room 309. We'll be back with the decision making on the bills for the previous hearing. Recess.
Still need one more person.
Oh, we're actually, welcome back, everybody. We are waiting for quorum, so we'll recess again. So real easy. Okay. Thank you so much. Decision making from the previous hearing. First up, 1426, orders of the Campaign Spending Commission. Defective date, we have concerns that if for some reason you don't get a proper notification, that you are now cut off from having due process insofar as being able to argue that had you would have contested the hearing and there would have been a contested hearing taking place. So that being said, we're going to have the next committee look at that issue, particularly since it's really in their ball. Effective date of 2112. Members, questions, comments? If not, Vice Chair 1426, House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation to pass 1426 with amendments, Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Representative Eli.
Aye.
Representative Ichiyama. Aye. Representative Mizuno is excused. Representative Woodson.
Aye.
Representative Yamashita.
Aye.
Representative Ward.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, next one up, 1427, pretty much housekeeping. Recommendation is as is. Questions, comments? If not, Vice Chair as is.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation to pass 1427 as is. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye, noting Representative Mizuno's excused absence for the rest of decision making. Do we have any no's or reservations from other members? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you so much. HB 1879, we're going to defer that measure. We're going to also defer HB 1951. We're going to go ahead and move 1880 along for further conversation by simply adding an effective date. Questions, comments? If not, Vice Chair, 1880, House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation to pass HB 1880 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Any no's or reservations from other members? Noting Representative Mizuno's presence. Representative Mizuno.
I'm on it. I'm up.
Thank you. Any other no or reservation votes? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, everybody. 2376, we're going to go ahead and defer this measure. 2474 relating to elections. We're going to move this one along as well for procedural more consideration. Effective date of 21/12. Questions, comments? If not, 2474.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation to pass HB 2474 with amendments, Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Any other members with no or reservations on this measure? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you so much. House Bill 2007 relating to procurement. We're going to blank out the amount. It's one of the few cases where we need to have more conversation on that. And the effective date of 21/12. Members, questions, comments? If not, 2007.
Your recommendation to pass HB 2007 with amendments, Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Any other members with reservations or no vote? Mahalo, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, everybody. House Bill 2066. We're going to defer this one for the rest of the session, as with 2067 as well. 2068 relating to Hawaii products. You know, we love our Hawaii products and buy local. So we're going to move this forward along with the other bills that have gone forward with an effective date of 21/12. If not, members, questions, comments? If not, 2068.
Mahalo, Chair. Your recommendation to pass HB 2068 with amendments, Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Any other members with no or reservations on this measure? Thanks, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you so much. 2504, we recognize the concerns that were raised at testimony of the bill when we heard it. However, we think it's worthy of a discussion to create greater transparency in contract awards for evaluation. We're going to go ahead and insert a blank amount for the minimum contract that will be required and recommend that the next committee look at a suggested amount of $1 million or more for a contract threshold. And again, because this is an ongoing discussion, the effective date of 21/12. Members, questions, comments? If not, 2504 HG1.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation to pass HB 2504 with amendments, Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Any members with no or reservation votes? Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation.
Okay,
is
and
adopted.
2349, we're going to go ahead and defer this measure as well. I believe that concludes our decision making. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I appreciate the patience.
Mahalo.